Hello and welcome back to the Peak Endurance Podcast. Episode 149 is an interview with Chris from a company called Ultraworking. Ultraworking is a startup researching peak performance. They study biochemistry, operations and psychology to understand what makes people perform at their highest levels. Chris comes onto the podcast to discuss these concepts as they apply to athletes and more specifically ultrarunners. Don't forget to show your support for this show by rating, reviewing and subscribing. It really makes my day. The link is in the show notes, so I appreciate it. My coaching services are currently at full capacity. To get onto the waiting list, go to my website, peakendurancecoaching.com.au and register your name, or you can go to the show notes for the link to that page. No, once again, I had an issue with my laptop. I don't know why it seems to hate Zoom at the moment. That's the only time it's doing this. But I'm working on it to find out what's going on. So just bear with us. I think it wasn't too bad. Are you sick and tired of being injured or running in pain? Ensure you're ready for racing and come in and see the team at Health and High Performance. Now, I go and see Luke even when I'm not in pain. I just go for regular, checkups to keep me running smoothly. Love running again by heading to healthhp.com.au/run, or you can find them easily on Instagram, Health High Performance, where I post heaps of good videos that help. I love talking high performance and how we can optimise everything we do. I hope you get some great ideas from this podcast. The link to the resources we discuss are in the podcast show notes. Now, next week's pod is Ron and I talking about my Barclay preparation. By the time it goes out, I will already be in the States at Frozen Head State Park. Hard to imagine. Excuse the dog barking. Gee, it's annoying. Exciting times ahead. If you want to get more awesome running info, make sure you join the Peak Endurance Running Group on Facebook. It's a great place for all things endurance running. That's not my dog, by the way. It's a neighbour's. Or you can go to my website, peakendurancecoaching.com.au. Once again, the link is in the show notes to get onto my email list for my newsletter. Enjoy the pod. Hi, Chris, and welcome to the Peak Endurance Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. Now, can you tell the listeners just a bit about yourself?
For sure. My name is Chris. I'm an engineer, trained as an engineer. I've worked as a health coach for many years, working primarily with executive type people. And now I'm product leader at a company called Ultraworking. We spend a lot of our energy developing tools to help people perform better work, have a better time doing better work, planning, and really helping them with systems to make that part of their life easier and more enjoyable.
No, that's quite interesting because, if we can do that in our work life, then we can have, obviously a more productive work life, but better life all round. So how would that sort of what you're working on relate to runners?
So there are certain best principles that we find that apply to almost taking on any endeavor that you're trying to take on. This could be a project at work, or this could be your next running season or the next race you're preparing to. These tools are not necessarily, or these things are not necessarily used in a systematic way, and we're bundling them together and trying to teach people almost like an operating system of how to approach a certain project. So, for example, when it comes to work, we will ask people before they sit down to start on a project. We'll ask them certain questions to really prime them or have them hone in on the target with much more accuracy before engaging in the work. So, for example, one of the key important things is that when you start something, you have a clear understanding, or as clear of an understanding as you can, of what the end result of that work session is supposed to look like. What am I trying to accomplish in the next 4 hours, for example? And this is something that is really important for work, but it's also a question that makes a lot of sense when we look at training and performance. knowing why you are doing a certain type of exercise, knowing why you're doing a certain type of training protocol and how it fits into your bigger picture, your goals. Yeah, having a clear goal in mind before setting out to do a certain activity. So when you put on your running shoes and you're preparing for your next run, I'm really thinking about, okay, what am I trying to do? What is this run going to accomplish, or what am I trying to accomplish here? Is this just getting some reps in? Am I working on my mindset as I push myself? Am I working on technique? And this will have an influence over the outcome of your training and sort of how much per unit of time you're getting out of the activity that you're doing.
So how does, I mean, you say it is helpful, but in what way? Like, so if I think about that before I go for a run, does that keep me more focused on what I'm doing, as opposed to then just being going off, right. Sometimes like we do when we run and we don't really think about what we're doing. What is the benefits of, even while we're running, thinking about what we're doing?
So I would say, to summarize it, is you make the activity much more deliberate. So with work, I'm sure everybody has experienced this when you sit down and you are kind of a little bit spinning your wheels. You're spending a lot of time working on something, but you're not necessarily making progress towards a finished state, because you're not really even sure what the finished state is supposed to look like. And when you don't know exactly where you're going, you end up going in circles or just taking a big detour to finally reach your destination. And priming yourself to really know before you set out what you're trying to do will avoid going in random directions. In terms of a work session, this usually means getting a lot better results in a lot less time, because you're avoiding going first in one direction, realizing that this is actually not what's going to get you the results you're looking for, and then reversing course and going in another direction. So for example, so one of our main tools is called work cycles, and this is a great tool to get a really quick way to get a lot of work done in a 4-hour period, by systematically thinking about a few questions before engaging in the activity. So one of the core principles is that before we start the work, we clearly define the scope. What am I trying to accomplish in the next, for example, 4 hours? What does this entail? What are the different things I'm trying to finish? The next question to think about is, why is this important and valuable? And this is you can get a lot of mileage, no pun intended, out of this question by thinking how this work that you're performing or the training that you're doing is important and valuable. And you can look at it from different perspectives. For example, in the context of work, why is this important and valuable for the user or the person that is going to benefit from the work ultimately? Why is this important for the organization that I'm doing this for? And why is this important and valuable for myself? And the answer could be, I'm learning, I have the ability to develop some skills here. I can improve some of my own thinking around something. For the user is, it's going to help them with, getting better results in training, getting better nutrition, whatever the work is that you're trying to perform. And then the next question, how will I know that this is complete? How will what does the end result look like? I mean, in terms of a running context, it could be, I've completed 50 kilometers. I've improved my technique in this detail. I've paid more attention to that. I've maybe managed to find a way to deal with inner voices as they come up during a race. And that brings me to the next point, which is addressing failure cases proactively before they come up. So, you know, as you're going into an activity, you can sometimes think of certain things that could go wrong. For example, you could run into technical difficulties. You could run into, areas where you're waiting on information which you don't have at the moment, and then how do you address those? Or in the context of athletic activities, maybe there is a nagging injury that you still have that might flare up, yeah, that's a good example, I think. What will you do when that happens? Will you abort the training and go back, or will you maybe slow down to a walking pace and complete the distance? Like, this is an example, but you're basically trying to come up with a strategy to handle the failure case when it arises before it actually arises. So you don't have to do any thinking when it comes up. You can just execute the plan that you have already set out to do. So that's the macro planning. And then we go into 30-minute work sessions that look very similar. We plan basically to that same level of detail, the 30-minute block. And then this is, I think, another really important part that I didn't systematically do in the past, which is closing the feedback loop. So after the work has been done or the training session has been completed, you really sit down and you take just a few minutes to go over what just happened and look at takeaways. What did I learn? What could I do better tomorrow? And this really over time has a huge difference, because you're not only having a better session, you're having a increasingly better session, because you're learning something new every single time you do a training or a work session.
And I'm guessing you can reflect also on what went well, but also what could be improved and that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Both things are important.
Yeah. And what I'm getting from you also is it's almost increasing mindfulness, so that you're really more mindful of what you're doing. But as we both know, there's so many distractions in the modern world. How do we avoid the distractions from taking us away? Because
right.
I find that, you know, you can have your goals at the start, but then you get distracted by this and that, and then you lose that focus. How do we avoid that?
So that's where...
Sorry, we're back on, just a technical glitch there. So we were talking about how do we avoid distractions in this modern world? Right.
I mean, when it comes to work, there's been a lot of focus in the last few years. A lot of books have been written about, the concept, for example, of deep work and distractionless work. And I mean, I feel like it's something that we have to really address. It's there are a lot of things out there that are trying to steal our attention, are really actively. Social media is designed to take our attention. And we have to treat it accordingly. We can't just, in my opinion, like really nilly, let it be there and do that. So I'm putting for myself a lot of defenses in place in terms of certain tools that will just block the distracting website for most of the time. Basically, I mean, that's typical thing from building habits. You want to make the habits that you want to encourage. You want to make them very, very visible in your life, and you want to basically push down all of the things that you don't want to do and make them sort of not present their triggers everywhere you go. And the same is true for nutrition, for example. You don't want to you don't want to go shopping when you're hungry. You don't want to have candy bars lying around your house, because I am not necessarily, it's really good to train your willpower. It's a mighty weapon, but you don't want to use it all the time. If possible, you want to use it for the moments when you really have to. And aside from that, you want to structure your environment in a way where you're not reliant on willpower all the time to prevent you from doing something you don't want to do.
Right, because willpower is a finite resource, and yes, we want to make the good habits easy to achieve, as opposed to and the bad habits hard to achieve, I guess.
Exactly. You want to put a barrier between yourself and the hard habits, and
Yes.
and make it super easy to jump right into the things you want to do more of.
Yeah, so I'm guessing like with things like social media, we can put on different kinds of focus on our phones and try to avoid that sort of stuff. And yeah.
I feel like that's the only way. I think over time, it's when something is introduced, when something is very new, we don't have defenses for it yet. I think more and more people realize that it's something that it's almost a necessary skill set in modern world to be able to only selectively let information and block out the rest, or the information you don't want to have, or because otherwise there is just too much going on at today to be
Yes.
able to focus on everything. And if you try to focus on everything, you'll end up making progress on nothing, unfortunately.
Yes, I totally agree. I'm a big fan of unitasking, just focusing on one task at a time. Because if you focus on more than one, you just do two badly rather than one well.
Right. Yeah. You have the so in engineering, like when Toyota started doing their lean manufacturing, they realized that it's not good to have a lot of unfinished cars sitting around, and we're trying to reduce the inventory. And the same is true for work. There's also the concept of mental inventory, cognitive inventory. Too many work in progress things that when you context switch between different contexts, and there's a lot of science around this, it takes you quite a while to load the new context into your working memory, and you always have a switching cost attached. So you're totally right, like getting one task and seeing that through all the way to completion, and then taking the next one, that is overall much more efficient.
I would agree with that. So say for instance, if someone is been working all day, and then they come home to go for their run, and they've got all their thoughts of work and everything in their mind, how would they sort of like end cycle on that work stuff so that they can focus on their training or their family life or whatever it is?
Right. Okay, I think is an important concept is actually the last question in our planning is to get to a good stopping point.
Yeah.
To find a place where you can sort of unload all of the mental stuff that you still have in your mind. Make a note, for example, of or schedule in your calendar when you will continue work on the work that you just finished. So if you didn't get it completely done, actually schedule the next session already, and try to unload as much of the information that you have in your mind. I mean, it's not always completely possible, certain it's a little bit certain people are really good at making that cut, disconnecting, and switching context. And for some other people, maybe you will think about that a little bit. But I think that's kind of what I think running is extremely good at. I mean, I think one of the things that people really are drawn to running, even when they're not even close to a professional or really athletic level, even most amateur hobbyist runners say, hey, that's one of the activities that really helps me to clear my mind and forget about all of the other things and just focus on the next step or the next mile ahead.
No, that's fair enough. Now, earlier you spoke about dealing with failures. A lot of runners have trouble with dealing with what they perceive as failures. What are certain things that we can do to either help prepare us, because eventually we all fail in some way, even if it's not really failure, we don't necessarily achieve what we want. And how do we prepare for that, and how do we deal with it?
So I think one important element is to, when we define our goals against which we measure ourselves, I think it's actually healthy to factor in or really aim for a certain level of not underachievement, but make your goals in a way where perfection is not even necessarily the goal. So when we have one of our tools called Lights, which is, if you break it down, it's a relatively simple habit tracker, but the simplicity is what really makes it such an effective tool that people really like. A lot of about establishing habits has to do with the feedback we're getting and exactly how certain tools are structured, and a lot of thinking has to go into how certain things are named and how we interact with them, that will have an impact on how consistently we do something. And in that tool, now we're telling people that they should be aiming roughly for a 70% goal achievement rate.
Okay.
So set your goals in a way where you can get about 70% done. If you achieve 100%, that means you have probably not set your goals high enough.
Yeah.
And if you're achieving too little, then then now there's a reason to analyze. Is this because we just set unrealistic goals, which is totally possible, or was there a bit of a lapse in our execution? But once you do that and you set realistic, but still pushing yourself, like expanding your boundaries on your goals, then you will usually get pretty good results in terms of your actual outcomes. But you're also not you're not going to overthink if you're missing a few targets, because missing a few targets is actually part of the plan. You set your goals in a way where that is just naturally going to happen.
And I personally, I don't know about you, but I personally feel that the failures, for want of a better word, are the times when I have learned the most, and I can almost look back on them, like I remember them more and feel more for them than even the wins.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's how our minds are wired. We're very averse to losing something, and for example, I mean, nothing gets someone more focused on, for example, improving their training and seeing what they missed than maybe an injury.
Yes.
After an injury, you're like your mind is laser focused on how can I prevent this from ever happening again. And a lot of my personal improvements to my own exercise regimen, and like really incorporating stuff new novel stuff, almost always came after an injury. And there's a lot of so there's like a lot of learning actually to be done on both sides of the scale. So on one end, you want to failures or problems are really good motivator and really good case to analyze and study. At the same time, it can also be very useful to just ask the question, what of the things that that I know are working could I be doing more of? And one question that I also find personally for me really interesting, what are the things that you already know are working that you currently are not doing? And this will almost always come up with something that you already know it's going to work because you've done it in the past and it worked in the past, but you just, for whatever reason, currently are not doing it.
Yeah, and that's a good one. And I think very relevant for runners, probably when it comes to like stretching and strength work and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, with if you look at the ultra endurance and how much your body has to take there, it requires a lot of sort of the maintenance of the systems.
That's right.
To take that.
Yeah. And I think it's important to look at failures as not necessarily a negative thing, but although we do have the negative bias, like you said, but to see it, to try to reframe it so there's some positives coming from it.
I mean, it's failure is it's so interesting to define even, and especially in the context of sports. I mean, the best I think I would say, the best people in a sport have usually quote unquote failed the most
Yes,
because they've done it the most. Right?
exactly.
They've put in the most reps. They missed like the best basketball shot has probably missed the most shots because he's practiced the most. So
Yeah.
is a missed shot a failure? It's really about the end result. So and it's a necessary part. If you don't fail, it's very hard to achieve anything if you're not willing to fail at some point.
And if you don't ever fail, then yeah, like you said earlier, you aren't probably not really trying hard enough or pushing yourself high enough.
Right.
Yeah, like if you to always succeed means maybe you aren't challenging yourself enough.
Yeah, or just a freak of nature.
Yeah, there's always that too. Yeah, we get jealous of those people. Yes. And so as a health coach to, over the years, what role does, say, even nutrition play in helping us focus?
I think, from nutrition in my world plays a huge role and is sort of the foundation for everything. It's a multiplier of whatever you're doing. If you're, have a really, really good training protocol, and you combine that with really good nutrition, you're going to get better results. And it's one of those things where you can avoid it or you can neglect it for some time, but you can't really neglect it forever. It will catch up with you. In terms, for example, of, with ultra endurance, maybe that's the exception where you can actually manage to outrun a bad diet.
Oh, no, I don't even think with ultras you can.
Generally, when it comes to, for example, working with someone for body composition, maybe as a primary goal, I would say that the majority of the gains in that front come from nutrition. Yeah. And then also when we look at work, there are some, let's say we take work as the thing that we're trying to become better at. There are all of the auxiliary activities that will help to make this better, and that also will lead to problems if we neglect them. So, for example, things like proper nutrition, proper sleep, for work, proper fitness. For fitness, maybe proper work is more important, like, so as an auxiliary help. But we run one event that has been really popular and people seem to really enjoy it, called the pentathlon, where we basically try to focus people on getting the fundamentals right in the other areas of their life, so they can get really dialed in on performing in their work. So for a period of 2 weeks, people are grouped into teams. Yep. This creates a little bit of a competitive environment, but also helps people with accountability within their teams. And then people are rated on across 5 different domains, which are fitness, nutrition, planning, sleep, and then ultimately the work they're doing. And what we're trying to encourage people here is not to set them the most outlandish goals and go on the craziest diet regimen that they've ever been on, but just pick something that is slightly pushing their boundaries, but that they can be consistent in for 2 weeks. So for 2 weeks, you're hitting a consistent fitness goal, and this could be a 1 mile run if you've never run before. This could be 20 push-ups if this is something you've not done. And for some people, it's a really intense workout every single day, because that's where they are already at. Then for nutrition, same thing. Pick something. Maybe you just cut out one thing from your diet for those 2 weeks, or you pay a little more attention. And some people are on like a super strict ketogenic diet for 2 weeks. Yeah. And then sleep, consistency, once again, here is key. It's not necessarily about when you go to bed or when you wake up, but having a consistent schedule, and then doing daily planning. This is something that we found that even really accomplished or like organized people do not necessarily do every single day, but it's something that once you do it, you realize how much value you can get out of it from daily planning and review. And
so you mean like planning what you're going to do for the entire day? Is that, and would you do that in the morning of or the night before?
I think the best way is to do a little bit of both. So I plan my day in the evening. I look at the next day. I take the learnings from the last day. I come up with some improvements, what went well, what did actually happen. And then the next morning I review my plan and adjust it to, maybe things that will have come up. And then, and this I think really translates to exercise as well. We rate work in two different ways. Number one, for consistency. So you get half of the points that you can get in this area for just working on your project, on your most important work for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Because goals or like projects don't die because they didn't get 4 hours of attention every single day. They die because they didn't get any attention for 2 weeks, and then they just sort of fizzle out. And I think when we look at exercise and becoming good at any endeavor, it's not necessarily that you push yourself 100% every single workout, but it's that you show up to every single workout, or that you're not completely resisting your body. Yeah, I mean, when we look at getting stronger or faster or getting more endurance, it's a lot about response recovery. So you're sending the signal to your body that it should adapt by doing a run, and it just has to be above your standard level of exhaustion. Really, if it's a little bit more exhausting than what your body is currently used to, that it will adapt to that stimulus over time. And it's this combination of giving the stimulus, giving your body time to recover, another stimulus, another recovery period that will really give you the results over time. And then coming back to the work, then we also give you points for quantity. So basically, if you do 100 minutes of your most important work every single day, you get the total number of points. And it's interesting how this environment of accountability and a bit of competition, friendly competition with the other teams, and this scoring nature encourages people to really stick to their diet, put in their 30 minutes of exercise every day, and put in the 100 minutes on their most important work.
Yeah, I think adding the competitive element really helps with that sort of thing, I can imagine.
Right. Yeah. There is the competitive element, and also the team element of not wanting to let your team down is huge. For whatever reason, humans are, we're pretty, like most people, actually very uncomfortable letting other people down, but a little bit more comfortable letting themselves down.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
Right. And you can if you know that, you can systematically use it. You can make use of that, either a feature or a bug, the way we want to look at it. But for exercise, for example, if you're someone who knows that about himself, that he's really good at not letting other people down, you get a training partner and you're basically good to go. You will never miss a workout.
Yeah.
These are some knowing. I think it's a healthy thing to know that about yourself, and not you could view it as a negative, but if you just take it as the way things are and the way minds are wired, and then you can really make use of it for your own life.
Yeah, and that's it. It's not necessarily a negative. I mean, it's just a reflection on who you are. Like, and in saying that, how important is it to kind of know ourselves to be able to then find ways of workarounds like that?
I think it's very important. We in our company, use certain tools, certain personality tests
Yeah.
to get a little bit deeper knowledge of how we are and how also other people are, how, to see differences. If you only see yourself, then you wouldn't even catch something as being extraordinary maybe, or being exceptional, because you don't necessarily see how other people operate and work. And also it makes it easier for you to collaborate with other people if you know how they function, how they tick, and how you tick, and where that could lead to friction or where that could lead to really great collaboration. So I think it's always good to have a better understanding of your own mind, the way you like things to be done. You might be, and I mean, this is kind of true for sports, in the sense that know where your strengths lie, and focus on that, and don't try to be something that maybe you're not in a sense of that area.
Yeah, well, and especially for something like ultra running, where you spend a lot of time in your own head, many hours. You don't want to have any, it's good to know who you are as a person, so that you can deal with it, like you said earlier, the voices in your head, because really it's just your creation, those voices. So
I mean, for me, and I've never run an ultra marathon, but I think from everything that I've seen, and I've actually spent quite a bit of time looking at that scene. It's one of the most mental sports that I think are out there. It's just hours and hours of dealing with that mental with the inner game of that sport. And I think it seems to me that the best people in the sport are the best people at that particular part of the.
But I think also then what you're talking about with all the systems that you put in place, it's a way of disciplining the mind to stay focused on one thought at a time, and one goal at a time, which therefore would be really beneficial in sport, for instance, something like ultra running.
Having a systematic way to approach certain things. I mean, so the people that are drawn to the work that we do are mostly analytical people that are systematic already, but also someone who is looking for a bit of an external structure, a bit of a game plan to follow that is proven to work and has a track record to work. And it's sort of it's a bit of an operating system for doing work successfully and repeatedly successfully. Once you're good at this skill of being able to lay out the work that you're trying to do and then stay on task, and not go in any other directions, becomes really powerful, because now you can really just put it as a block in your calendar, and you can guarantee that work gets done. Which is not necessarily something that I think everybody naturally has access to.
No, I mean, I've seen many people's working styles over the years, and a lot of people work long hours but don't necessarily achieve a lot. So if we want to try to really be productive at work, but efficiently productive, then it's good to have systems in place, and then we will have more time for running.
Absolutely. I think whatever you do, you want to do it. The worst part in terms of the worst thing for me is if you're not fully engaged with the activity that you're doing. So if you're at work thinking about, wanting to do something else, running, and then maybe if you're running, because you didn't get part of the work done, you're still thinking about your work. So you're between both things. If you're really good at, setting a target and just ruthlessly executing on it and just getting it off your plate, that frees up. That's very powerful. And we are with two elements. It's the right project selection. What are we going to work on? What are we going to focus on? And then the execution. How are we going to attack it and get it done. And if you're good at those two things, the first part, the selection is arguably more important. If you're choosing wisely what you're spending your time on and what gets you the biggest return on investment of the time that you're spending, then you've made a big step towards the goal. And then if you're also really good at efficiently finishing the work, then you really have a great combination of strength that will help you in whatever you do, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that sounds perfect. Now, where can people find out more about all of this that you're doing now?
Yeah, you can go to ultraworking.com. And if you go to ultraworking.com/endurance, then we'll have actually a page with all of the tools that I just mentioned, if you want to try them. And we have basically all of the tools that I mentioned have a free version that is fully functional that you can use.
Awesome.
And see if you can get benefits from it. The way and I think this is a funny anecdote, I now work at Ultraworking, but I have been a user of their tools for several years. And I was already someone that considered himself pretty on top of his game when it came to being organized and being structured and the way I approached things. But even I got a ton of improvements for my own thinking out of those, and that's how I ended up eventually wanting to work here.
Oh, that's awesome. And so just out of interest, did you approach them or did they end up approaching you?
They ran an event where we these work cycles are done online. One of the main products is called the Work Gym, where you basically in a Zoom call as you do these work sessions, and this creates the accountability. Not working by yourselves, but you actually feel like you're working with someone. Extremely valuable, especially today where everybody's doing work from home, where you're not feeling like you're by yourself, but you have this group of really good and accomplished people around you working on their projects and they did some of these events in person. So you can know that this was not in the last 2 years. Over that we got connected. Me and the founder got along really well. Kind of like-minded people, and that's how I eventually ended up here.
Well, that's awesome. That's brilliant. All righty. Well, I'll put those links in the show notes so people can have a look and access those free resources. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me again. It was a great conversation.
All righty. Thanks for that. Bye.